What? Oh! Oh no!
I love monster movies. I've loved them since I was a kid. I grew up watching movies like The Thing, Alien, Predator, Alien vs. Predator. But if there was one thing I loved more than monsters growing up, it was giant monsters. I remember being 7 years old and seeing Peter Jackson's King Kong in theaters. I remember being 10 years old and counting down the days until Cloverfield came out. Even the 1998 American Godzilla movie saw plenty of runs in my house. I, however, was not the resident Godzilla expert growing up. That would be my little brother. And through him, I would have exposure to basically every film and character in the Godzilla franchise, all the way from Showa to Millennium. My ticket into the Godzilla fandom came in 2014 when Legendary kicked off the MonsterVerse with Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. In fact, I am currently in the middle of writing a video about Gareth Edwards, but had to postpone it after seeing Godzilla Minus One in theaters. After seeing the absolute glowing reviews that this movie is getting and the records that it's breaking, as a fan of the franchise and movies in general, it would be a shame if I missed out on seeing this one in theaters. And so I'm here to report, the movie is excellent. There were tears that ran down my face, but I did not cry. You know how sometimes you get out of a movie and the more you think about it, the more you just get kind of like a sour taste in your mouth, like someone just tricked you? Mario movie. This is whatever the opposite of that is. The more I reflect on this movie, the more I like it, and the more I want to see it again. You know how in the MonsterVerse you are eagerly awaiting Godzilla's arrival and you yearn to see more of him whenever the boring humans are on screen? This is whatever the opposite of that is. The more time you spend with these human characters, the more you dread his impending arrival, as you don't want any harm to come of them. No need to rewind, you heard me right the first time. You like and care about the human story in this Godzilla movie, even the side characters. I am rushing to get this video out while it's still in theaters because its theatrical runtime was just extended from the 7th to the 14th of December. And they've also said that it will continue to stay in theaters as long as people continue to go see it. So before we get into any spoiler territory and before it leaves the theaters, in support of great human characters and a great human story, go see this movie before it leaves theaters. And if you happen to be watching this in the future, buy it, rent it, stream it, do whatever you have to do to watch this movie, especially before we get into spoilers, because it's one of my favorites of the year. In preparation for this movie, I watched the original Godzilla from 1954, and I'm glad I did that because while this is not supposed to be a remake, it is basically like a modern retelling of the original 1954 film, with a few details changed. If Godzilla in 1954 was an allegory for atomic warfare and humanity's pursuit of bigger and more destructive weaponry, Godzilla in Minus One is an allegory for PTSD and survivor's guilt. How even after the war has ended, the struggle to live through tragedy is one that can destroy the world around you and the relationships with the people close to you. We can see as Shikishima's regrets and traumas build with every subsequent attack from Godzilla, they roughly correlate with Godzilla's actions throughout the movie, growing bigger and stronger as Shikishima fights his own battle to fight and live for a better tomorrow. And this is where the main theme of the movie lives: the will to work for a tomorrow that is not promised, and not to feel guilty about the gift of life, and rather live for those that are no longer with us. We see it in every character as the country of Japan reels from the devastation and loss of life in World War II. A moment that stuck out to me in the film was following Godzilla's attack on Odo Island, Shikishima returns to a home destroyed by the Tokyo air raids. There he meets with his neighbor, who is understandably surprised to see him considering he was a kamikaze pilot. His neighbor shames him for showing his face, while telling him that the death of everyone in the air raids, including her 2 children, are due to his cowardice. But what stuck with me in this scene was the fact that in the face of all this tragedy, in the wake of losing her 2 children, she is up, active, and repairing her town. Now, I'm not saying that the director meant for us to read this much into it, but she could have been doing anything. She could have been crying, mourning her children. She could have just stormed away disgusted, but she didn't. She was working to repair what her community had lost. Following the aftermath of Godzilla's attack on Ginza, 1, I absolutely hated Godzilla, like viscerally wanted him to die so badly. And 2, I was wondering how is Shikishima gonna move on from this? If I was him, I would literally just walk towards Godzilla and be like, bro, you got it, just stop me, just step on me. They explain in the movie that the military can't help the citizens in their plan to destroy Godzilla due to the US occupation, which makes sense because PTSD and trauma can't be conquered with conventional weaponry. It's through the leaning on people close to you and living for others that this giant, powerful monster can be defeated. When watching the movie, I got a lot of similar feelings to Jaws, which made sense after I learned Jaws was a major inspiration for the director while making the film. It also felt to me that this could have been a movie written in like the 80s or 90s. It didn't feel like a modern film, which also made sense to me when I heard some reviewers call it a bit tropey or cliche, and a few others compared it to films like Top Gun Maverick. And I agree, because much like Top Gun Maverick, this movie doesn't reinvent the wheel or do anything new that we haven't seen before. It just does what we already know works to an extremely high degree. Expecting super unconventional storytelling or super unconventional filmmaking, you won't find much of that here. The story, of course, has its surprises, but none that are meant to confuse or muddy the water. The biggest issue I have with the story is at the very, very end. After Godzilla has been killed, while I'm of course relieved that Noriko survived and that the family could be together in the end, it takes away a little bit of the emotional impact that her death had, which I thought was the most impactful moment of the film. That, as well as at the very end, which implies a sequel. Noriko is infected with the black sludge that rained down as a result of the heat ray explosion, and Godzilla has begun his regeneration process following his takedown. I think the reason that mid-credit and end-credit scenes are so effective, while they are overused today, is because putting scenes like this directly after your emotional climax of the movie, it doesn't allow the audience to sit and bask in that victory that you work the entire length of the movie building up to. And to be honest, I think they're kind of unnecessary altogether. There's no reason that those two future plot points can't be established in the sequel in order to leave the ending of Minus One just pure. Of course, none of this ruins the movie for me. These are just things that I would have liked to see changed. And speaking of changes, can we talk about Godzilla's atomic breath? It can be hard for movies to change and toy around with iconic aspects of the franchise characters that made them so, well, iconic. Where you see this debated a lot is with comic book superheroes and their adaptations into other stories. Batman doesn't kill, or does he? Spider-Man doesn't shoot webs, he has to make them himself. Or does he? Even Superman didn't fly originally, he could just jump far, and not even that far. What you come to realize is that some of these aspects of these characters are more malleable than others. Godzilla's iconic atomic breath, or heat ray, whichever you wish to call it, has seen many different iterations over the years. Sometimes it's misty and smoky, sometimes it's a blue concentrated beam, sometimes it's orange fire, sometimes it's an orange concentrated beam, and sometimes it's blue fire. And then sometimes it's whatever the hell Shin Godzilla has going on. Why then, when I watch Godzilla 1988, do I immediately get the urge to become insufferable and say, actually, Godzilla doesn't breathe fire, he breathes a blue atomic energy beam. But then when Toho spits in my face and says, yeah, not only does Godzilla breathe fire, but his energy beam is not actually blue, it's purple, and it comes out of his spines and his tail. Why do I say, yeah, it makes sense to me? These changes you make have to be in service of the character, and they can't just be a change for change's sake. So when I first saw that they gave Godzilla the ability to create nuclear explosions from his atomic breath, I asked myself, why haven't we been doing this for the past 70 years? This is my favorite iteration of Godzilla's atomic breath ever put to screen. While I think Shin Godzilla still has the best atomic breath sequence, giving Godzilla the ability to shoot nukes from his mouth makes much more sense for the character. There is a shot over the shoulder of Godzilla as he calmly looks onward at the giant mushroom cloud, and it might be my favorite shot of Godzilla in a movie ever. There are 3 nuclear explosions in this movie that are all better than the explosion that Christopher Nolan put in Oppenheimer. I can't believe the man who gave us freaking Gargantua, you know, the thing that basically wrote the template for how to depict black holes in modern movies, he was like, nah, no CGI for this one, and everyone applauded it. I blame you for the reason we get a glorified gasoline explosion in that movie. Speaking of explosions, let's talk about the visual effects in this movie. In the middle of writing this video, it was just announced that Godzilla Minus One is a top 20 finalist for Best VFX of the Year, beating out movies like Oppenheimer. While I think Oppenheimer definitely deserves a spot over movies like Quantumania, I think including Godzilla Minus One here was the right decision. What this movie manages to do on a tight $15 million estimated budget is incredibly impressive. The scale of destruction caused by Godzilla and how it's captured on screen is amazing. Some people are getting a bit hyperbolic saying that it looks like a $200 million movie, and while the quality of effects are well above budget, saying it looks like a $200 million movie it's a bit of a stretch. However, I think what people are trying to get at is that it does look a lot better than a lot of the recent $200 million productions we've seen. With a lot of productions using technology like the volume as a clutch rather than a tool, as well as VFX schedules that are impossible to keep up with, we've seen such a decline in the quality of computer effects in big Hollywood productions, that when movies like Gareth Edwards' last movie, The Creator, manage to get it right, they make headlines. That Gareth Edwards video is coming soon, by the way, so subscribe, make sure you don't miss that one. And to be honest, I don't need my CGI to be on par with whatever Avatar or Dune is doing. Technology has advanced to such a point that talented artists can make projects for a fraction of the cost and time that it took before. Take this animated short. It was produced by a small team of 3 and looks like it was made by a major production. Except actually this was made by 16-year-old Ewan Garbett, and he won UK's Young Animator of the Year award this year. People are so caught up with the quality of effects, quality, that they forget if that quality is not surrounded by a story and characters that resonate, it's all just flash for show. If you aren't a Godzilla fan today, I suggest you become one now. There has never been a better time to learn about the King of the Monsters. With Toho continuing to stay grounded to Godzilla's roots with installments like Minus One or Shin Godzilla, and the Monsterverse continuing to explore that campier balls-to-the-wall side of the big guy, which, by the way, is just as much, if not more true to the legacy of the Godzilla franchise than when he is taken seriously. Can you believe that there's people out there that are mad that Godzilla is sprinting? Like, have y'all never seen Godzilla vs. Hedorah? This motherfucker can fly! I am just happy that this movie continues to break records. This is a win for small-budget movies, it's a win for foreign movies, and it's a win for monster movies. And it just continues to serve the narrative that there is a cultural shift taking place right now in what audience look for in their blockbusters today. If you've made it this far in the video, throw a T-Rex in the comments and let me know what you thought of Godzilla Minus One. Also be sure to stick around for future videos and check out some of the other videos I've done.